We had a very intensive but interesting, informative, and thought-provoking panels yesterday and this morning. We also had very constructive discussions at the business meetings. There were also certain recommendations emerged from these business meetings. But now it's the time to wrap up the whole conference and move to the concluding session. We have Gyari Rinpoche, popularly known as Lord Gyari in this part of the world, to chair the session. I don't need to introduce so much about Gyari Rinpoche, especially involved with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, reincarnate Lama, a practitioner, he has also served the Tibetan community in the past 50 years in different capacities. In this concluding session, we also have two very important speakers. His Eminence Ganden Rinpoche, who will make a special remark on the conference, and Professor Samdhong Rinpoche, Kalun Thipa, who will give a keynote address at this concluding session. Before welcoming Gyari Rinpoche to chair the session, I would like to invite Dr. Brinda Silva, coordinator of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's visit to the Emory University, and also a coordinator of this conference, to deliver a remark or the response to the report on the first international conference of the Mongolian Buddhism, which Khenpo Lama has presented in the opening session. Please welcome Dr. Brinda Silva.
Thank you, Tsewang Phuntsula. It's my great honor to read this response from the conference to the Most Venerable Khenpo Lama's report. Everyone was delighted to hear from His Eminence Khenpo Lama Gambu Trojam Stemberel, abbot of Ganden Tegchenling Monastery and head of the Center of Mongolian Buddhists, about the outcome of the first International Conference on Mongolian Buddhism. The Mongolian government was applauded for truly manifesting Mongolian national sentiments when it nullified the law dating back to the Soviet era that had abolished Buddhism, along with the institution of reincarnations, reincarnate lamas. This important decision has resulted in the recognition of the institution of the Jetsun Dampas and led to the granting of citizenship to the 9th Jetsun Dampa. We took very serious note of His Eminence Khenpo Lama's remarks about the need to establish a common platform or an international organization to represent our common traditions. We also feel that all followers of the Nalanda tradition ought to have a role in determining the future of the institution of the Dalai Lama on account of the fact that he is the preeminent leader of the Nalanda tradition and Tibetan Buddhism, and in view of the teacher-student relationship that this embodies. We are delighted to hear His Eminence say that Mongolia is a free and sovereign nation, and Mongolia is aware of its responsibilities. And we urge him, and through him, the Mongolian Sangha and people, to continue to play an active role in these matters. We know that next year, the Mongolian people will celebrate the centenary of their reestablishing of a sovereign Mongolian nation under the leadership of the 8th Jetsun Dampa, and we all convey our support and feelings of solidarity, as well as our wish to take part in the making of this great anniversary and to take part in making this great anniversary widely known all over the world. Finally, His Eminence Khenpo Lama concluded with a request that we join him in continuing the momentum of this Mongolian conference with the series of regular meetings of our various Buddhist traditions, This is an initiative that we welcome and enthusiastically endorse.
Thank you, Dr. Brenda Silva. Now I would like to request Dr. John Doan, Associate Professor of the Emory University, to present the summary of the outcome of the business meetings.
Thank you very much. I'd like to preface the reading of these proposals and recommendations from the various groups by saying that I heard that a number of the meetings were quite lively. There was a lot of very intense discussion, some humorous discussion, and I think also very, very fruitful discussion. I also spoke with John McCransky, who's the chair of one of the other groups, and John McCransky and I both thought that one possible outcome of some of these recommendations might be some more focused subgroups coming out of these various areas who might even engage in further dialogue or discussion or smaller focused meetings. So that was one overall proposal that arose from dialogue between a couple of the groups that I put on the table for your consideration. I'm just going to read through now the various proposals and recommendations that came from the groups. I believe it's in the order that they appear in the program. First, from the group entitled Tibetan Buddhism's Encounter with Modern Science, which was chaired by myself, John Dunn, we had 3 recommendations concerning the dialogue. The dialogue between Buddhism and science should maintain a pragmatic approach focused on the relief of suffering and the promotion of human flourishing. In view of this pragmatic emphasis, when Buddhism and science conflict in a way that cannot be currently reconciled, respectful and open-minded dialogue should continue. 3, when current science does not support a traditional Buddhist claim that ought to be scientifically testable, metaphorical reinterpretation of that claim should be considered. And so just to clarify that particular point, in the case of the question of whether or not the cosmology should be revised, if we do indeed believe that current scientific evidence suggests that this cosmology is in need of revision, that revision should be considered as a metaphorical reinterpretation of the cosmology, or at least some portions of it. We also had a few programmatic suggestions. First, number 1, explore the benefits of the dialogue by asking scientists to speak or write of their experiences in engaging with Buddhist thought and practice. 2, think below the neck. In other words, encourage scientific collaborations that permit researchers to examine the effects of practices not only on the brain, but also on the whole body. Third, clarify the relationship between interventions and therapies based on Buddhist practices and the Buddhist traditions and practices from which those therapies and interventions are drawn. And finally, fourth, encourage a translational approach that builds on research findings to produce practical and beneficial applications in fields such as education. Now, moving on to the group Tibetan Buddhism and Social Engagement, which was chaired by John McCransky, we had these following recommendations. First, our approach to socially engaged activity should be informed by the ways that Buddhist traditions have met deep-felt human needs in Asian cultures throughout history. Second, our socially engaged practice should draw equally from 2 wellsprings. First, the Tibetan Buddhist focus on embodied awakening and transforming emotions. And second, Western expertise in analysis and planning for effective social action. Third, humanitarian work in Tibetan cultural regions and throughout Asia should learn from and draw upon the wisdom and expertise of those local cultures. Fourth, new generations of leaders, especially women, should be trained to apply Buddhist principles and practices to address social needs and problems. And fifth, an infrastructure should be developed to broadly distribute knowledge about current and emerging ways of applying Buddhism to meet social needs. Now the group Translating the Dharma, chaired by Jose Cabizon, one of only 2 groups to actually give only 3 points. No, we have another one. 1, further effort and resources should be applied to developing an online dictionary or lexicographical tool that gives a list of a range of translations and shows words in their context by giving examples from texts. It should be noted that such tools do exist to some extent at this point, and the idea here is to really enhance those tools and perhaps combine some of the efforts already out there. 2, translations should address the needs of readers by making the target language accessible, readable, and even beautiful, and also through broader introductions, footnotes, and other supplemental material. And 3, we need to improve our resources and methods for training students in Tibetan language and extending support for translation as a viable career. Next, the group Tibetan Buddhism in the Modern Academy, chaired by David Germano. First, work on how higher education can help Tibetans. Establish sister relationships between universities and towns, and monasteries, and communities in Asia. Work with nonprofits on socially beneficial work, and work with professional schools to give our Tibetological expertise to them so as to provide benefit to Tibetan communities and institutions. Second, collaborate between traditional and academic exchanges. Create opportunities for co-teaching and co-curriculum development. Dharma centers and universities can enter into collaborations, and there is a great opportunity here for methodological exchange. And third, establish a central site where we can all register ourselves as individuals, projects, and organizations so we can more easily find out about ourselves and what we are doing. This can become the basis for various kinds of centralization of information and dissemination of important projects. Next, the group Tibetan Buddhism in Modern Western Culture, chaired by Gelek Rinpoche. First, in the context of Western Dharma practice, cultivate the higher practices of ethics, meditation, and wisdom through the cultivation of the 3 spheres: learning, contemplative practice, and ethical engagement. Second, for the viability of Tibetan Buddhist traditions in Western contexts, integrate useful aspects of other traditions such as yoga and mindfulness practices. And third, for the strength of the Western Buddhist community, provide opportunities and means for youths to study Buddhism and explore its practices in a way that sustains the monastic tradition while also enhancing sincere and robust lay practice. And then finally, surviving modernity in traditionally Tibetan Buddhist regions, chaired by Glenn Mullen. 1, develop network infrastructure. The traditional areas of Tibetan Buddhism have been cut off from one another by the loss of Tibet and also suffered economically from this tragedy. A modern network using internet and other technology could provide temporary relief both inside particular areas and throughout Central Asia. 2, foster the 4 supports of the Dharma, that is to say, Gelong, Gelongma, Genyen, and Genyenma. Awareness of this traditional structure in these regions needs to be enhanced. Third, cultivate an atmosphere of embracing and utilizing modernity rather than regarding it as a threat and danger. This means raising awareness of the transformative nature of the Dharma and how it has generally been the foundation of successful and prosperous Central Asian societies. It also means cultivating regional pride, and both in individual traditions and in the great communities throughout Central Asia. And finally, fourth, produce basic books in local languages on the practical applications of Dharma principles and meditations. In general, there is a large chasm between traditional Buddhist language and the modern vernacular as used in places as diverse as Mongolia, Ladakh, and Bhutan. More basic literature in regional vernaculars should be produced. And those then are, in short, the recommendations from the various groups here at our conference. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, John Don. Now, please join me in formally welcoming Gary Rinpoche to chair the session.
afternoon. I prefer to stand up so that I have a proper view of this great audience, which I think will inspire me to make some sensible remarks. But I'm really deeply honored to be asked to chair this concluding session and give this great opportunity, which really humbles me, to introduce two very eminent personalities, two persons that I personally also deeply respect. But I was asked by the organizers that I'm also supposed to make some remarks. What I felt is that if time allows, I will make my own personal remarks at the very end, because I think I may also receive inspirations from the speakers, or I may also feel the need to further elaborate on advice that we'll receive from Ganden Rinpoche and from Kalun Thiwa. However, as a Tibetan, as a devout Buddhist, I was given kind of a new title today as practitioner. That I certainly am not. I would like to become, I do hope, but I am very proud of being a Buddhist. And so therefore, again, it may sound, that as if I'm so much sort of amazed with my own tradition and I'm so grateful to my own lineage, but I really want to take this opportunity to really pay my gratitude to the Tibetan masters and the Tibetan scholars. I have no doubt in my mind that when we look back to the last 50 odd or 60 decades, it's very clear now to me that the reason why the Tibetan identity, the Tibetan civilization survived is due, and I can say almost to the single-handed effort of our great masters and teachers. Yes, those of us, you may call them bureaucrats, whatever, who have served His Holiness, and we worked very hard. Yes, many of us, and especially the elder generation, those who came out with His Holiness to exile, really did tremendously pioneering work. But today, it's very clear that the main reason why the Tibetan identity survives, not only it has survived, but it has become a major contributor to global happiness, is due to these great masters. I just made a remark a short while back, another gathering, that just think about, one person, Geshe Wangyal, the Sopo Geshe, we used to call him. Kalmuk, Geshe who came to the United States. But today, you see, just look at the tremendous seed that this one person has planted, which we, are benefited so much. And then, starting with people like Tomba Rinpoche and Kalun Rinpoche, many other, eminent, teachers came to the West. Then, of course, today with us also we have Soje Rinpoche, Gyalé Rinpoche. I don't want to mention because it's a long list. But I think what they have done is profoundly important. Of course, for all of us, for the rest of the world, but to us Tibetans. Just a few months back, I was in Dharamshala, and I, spent one afternoon with a young Tibetan parliamentarian, who had a kind of very modern, quote-unquote, upbringing. But he has just recently been to Balakope, where there was a big gathering of Tibetan leaders. And he was really amazed. He confessed, he said that, no, I must really admit the wonderful work that Tibetan lamas have done. Because quite often I think, even among us Tibetans, especially younger generations, see the lamas and the geshes and kembos, going to the West in the teaching, and maybe sometimes even raising funds. They really do not know, what happens. But then, this young parliamentarian, he visited Sarah, and he visited Namduling, and he said he actually wrote in the visitor's book, when he went to Namduling Monastery, how grateful he really felt how much these great masters have done. So therefore, I thought I'd take this opportunity to really, as a Tibetan, to say how grateful I am. And I think for us Tibetans to survive, as a people, as a civilization, we'll continue to depend on that contribution. That's why I think His Holiness has today become, as Richard and I talk all the time, and I absolutely agree with you, because I think he is now bigger than Tibet. I mean, it's the fact that you go around the world and you said that, where are you from? Tibet. Sometimes say that, oh, I see Tibet. Quite often they say, where Tibet? Then they say, Dalai Lama. Oh, yes. You see, so therefore, it is a fact that, His Holiness has become far bigger than Tibet. In the beginning, as a young activist, I used to feel that, in fact, I have shared this with you. When I had the opportunity to visit Europe for the first time with His Holiness, his first ever visit to the West, which Samdhong Rinpoche was very much involved with, halfway through, I felt that His Holiness was really not speaking too much about Tibet. And those days, I was, unfortunately, I think, among that category who felt that, it's all politics, slogans and slogans. And I felt that His Holiness should talk more about Tibet. So I took all the courage. One early morning, I remember even vividly the room, because I must have also been quite terrified, because, to be in His Holiness' presence, and especially when I was then quite young, this was, in the house of von Schultes, somewhere near Zurich. So I went, and His Holiness immediately knew that I had something on my mind. He said, Kardu, what is it? So I said, Your Holiness, I think you should talk a little bit more about Tibet. And he became relaxed. So I thought, now he's going to listen to me. And then he said, after, very careful sort of reflection, he said, yes, I have also thought that I need to talk more about Tibet. But he said, many of these people who come to see me, they come to see me because they somehow believe that sharing their suffering, their burden, somehow I may have some way of taking away their burden, which I do not. So he said, at least I feel it's not right for me to send them out of my presence with my burden. Look, this makes the difference between a mortal being like me and His Holiness. And I really felt, even deep reverence to His Holiness. He's absolutely right. But today, now looking back, I'm so happy again as a Tibetan that His Holiness became who he is, because by his becoming who he is, he has also uplifted Tibet. If he has remained himself confined, listening to short-sighted bureaucrats like me, most probably the Tibet issue too would have remained, forgotten issue. In my lifetime, I saw so many worthy causes forgotten, and you see, but Tibet still survives. So that again, makes me feel this, this deep reverence to His Holiness and, our teachers. Many of you are here today, so I just wanted to first, pay that respect. And with that, now let me, again, another easy task they gave me is that two persons who need no introduction. It only is a great honor. But first, I would like to ask Gandhin Rinpoche to bless us with his remarks. And one thing very, again, I think unique and extraordinary about this Gandhin Thiva is, because I myself, again, being kind of obsessed with kind of, this Buddhist, ideas, really for years, I was really all the time asking, when is, Rizal Rinpoche going to, and with Geshe Lobsang, I always ask him, become the next Gandhin Thiva. Because again, this clearly is an opportunity for us to demonstrate the international character of the Tibetan Buddhism, which is from Ladakh. He's not Tibetan, as we understand what Tibetan means. He's from Ladakh. But he today holds the highest position and one of the 4 important lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. Isn't that wonderful? That itself, clearly, you don't have to explain so much. The nature of the Tibetan Buddhism. It is universal. It really doesn't have that that boundary that you talked about, kind of, little line, on the political maps. And so, I mean, my only disappointment is that I really thought that his appointment to this high important position would be taken much more kind of celebrated manner in the Himalayan region. I mean, there was a lot of it, but I think we really need to, really, amplify that as much as, we can. And also recently we had, some of us had the opportunity to be with Rinpoche in Mongolia, and also gave us really extraordinary opportunity to see, his wisdom, his farsightedness, his leadership. So it is my great honor to ask Ganden Rinpoche to make, his remarks, his blessings.
강기 도쟁이 존나 나와다 방배지 담배 춘이 돈도 고담달라 차사로 도구물 루기 오마 사와셰르기 유성들 견도 어쨌든 강기 도쟁이 존나 나와다 방배지 담배 춘이 돈도 고담달라 차사로 나지가 또推荐들라 구르자도 고담 세대 배질 구담아세는 그 망디 치료배 보여서리 상계 호들라 칼리기 말아와 거기도 요도 안기좀 호다마스 뭐이 살이 나들이기 뭐 저자도 저기 이종게 나 이종 고다마스 참 생이 르르지만 르리산이지만 로 다들이 베르도 다디 소나힌 다들 다시 보고체 구두시네 다들 이제 아 병인이 다들 여서 이제 구섭제 예를 무죄당 아니 걸을 집어 줘다 이제나다 아니 드리트다 에머리 아니 돌 강기 노신 예 인대핑 거원한 이제 뭐 뭐자도 도나 또 저도 뭐 이만 뭐 뭐지 나한테 대도랑아 저기 좀 왔다 제가 가서 좀
I greet you all on this closing session of the International Conference on Tibet and Buddhism. And I begin this with an invocation to the Buddha by quoting the very last stanza that Acharya Nagarjuna offers in praise to Buddha, where he praises Buddha for his having taught the teachings on dependent origination out of compassion for all sentient beings to be relieved from suffering. I take this opportunity in thanking the organizers, namely the Emory University and the Office of Tibet, and also the two other organizations that extended their support, namely Tepung Losing Monastery, Atlanta, and the Conservancy for Tibetan Art and Culture. I take this opportunity in greeting the special envoy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Gary Rinpoche, and also the Kalyan Tipa, Professor Samdhong Rinpoche.
가보상분들의 상계 공주에 남게 상계 다 남이 집에 자유하래 어디기다 담바 홍 오모존에 다 담바 오모존에 다 빠질 담에 내세지 농아동이 말에 소랑아 소용하래 담에 소랑아들 tum부 파지 tum부 주동 샤고하래 아무게 아무자스니 아무게 버터 주스니 담에 우리는 마 차용 원대난 거래 빠진나나 빠질 유동합이야. 먼저 하도지. 내신 배인들이. 당이도 너네 집이야. 하도지. 다 내연들이.
These past 2 days, we have deliberated on very important topics, and lots of vibrant, lively discussions are believed to have taken place with a great potential for great actions to take place to manifest. And also over Khenpo Lama, several times there's no reason I see in repeating them, but I take this opportunity in sharing some of my thoughts and my observations. The era that we are going through, the great kalpa that we belong to, is believed to, in the scriptures it is said that it is believed to see the appearance of 1,000+ Buddhas, out of which the historical Buddha Shakyamuni is believed to be the fourth in succession, and of whom the entire teaching of him is believed to, or stated in the scriptures, to last for 5,000 years. And there is a system of dividing those 5,000 years into 10 sections or 10 eras, separate eras of 500 years each, out of which, as per the very common system of calculation, 2,550 years have already passed, and just little over 2,400 years remaining.
So tembaje ngaton namba ngaton ne yo mare tama ngaton namba de ne don twin yim ma de no korja jung do ne dire jile yus twi ji bo ta ta ma me korja jung gore ta wo de ne ya u la ta den ho jo martana den ma ta den ma jang jo ma ji ne ka shi yu ji jang cho de ma jang cho da de ya na da de ma ta yu se de ma da de ji ma ta bo ji ne twin yim ma che twi gi wang gi.
As per the appearance of Dharma, or rather the flourishing of Dharma, within this span of 5,000 years, the scriptures kind of suggest that the appearance wouldn't merely be permanent on one particular region, but rather one would see a movement or shift from place to place within this span of 5,000 years, beginning from the southern region of Vardhana, that is Bharat, India, towards the north, and maybe eventually to China and elsewhere. There are several references to this phenomena of where the Dharma would make the movement across different regions of the world, particularly in the perfection of wisdom cycle of teachings, where there is this mention of how the Dharma would move southward and then northward, and even further north, referring to Tibet, eventually to Mongolia and other areas. Even within those specific areas also, Dharma is supposed to undergo several upheavals, several ups and downs, just as we have seen in Tibet. That's the reason why we have this reference to the early dissemination of the Dharma and the later dissemination of the Dharma. Just as we hear His Holiness the Dalai Lama refer to this frequently during his teachings, the Buddha Dharma, after having flourished for some time in India, eventually made its movement towards China, in which region the great Chinese masters such as Xuanzang, Fa Hin. They were very instrumental in bringing the pure Dharma into the mainland China, and that too through various hardships that they had to undergo, given the fact that they were not such a development that we know of today. And then it was historically or chronologically, the Buddha Dharma appeared in Tibet much later than it did in China. But in terms of the mode of transmission is concerned, it seemed to have gone directly from India rather than having to go through China. So in a way, there was this later appearance of Dharma in India, in Tibet, yet the mode of transmission was more direct, and thus that kind of ensured the purity of it. And in terms of who were very instrumental at those early stages of the transference or transportation of Dharma into Tibet, we all know those are the Acharya Shantarakshita, the great master Padmasambhava, and Kamalashila, and later Atisha during the later dissemination of the Dharma. And then at the outset of the later dissemination of the Dharma in Tibet, marked by the appearance and the activities of Atisha in Tibet, that not only ensured the restoration of Buddha Dharma, but also was very helpful in dispelling lots of misconceptions about the authenticity, about the consistency, about the about the nature of various vehicles within Buddha Dharma, such as dispelling the misconception that Sutra and Tantra were far contradictory in nature, and that there cannot be a way to accommodate the two and harmonize the two. So such major misconceptions were dispelled, and thus leading to a much more smooth dissemination of it. So, and then from that time on, until, say, in the case of China, until the in the case of Tibet, until the invasion by China and eventual occupation of it, the Dharma kind of flourished in a very progressive way. Yet, within the past 100 years or so, we have seen lots of degeneration in the Dharma, particularly in Mongolia and also in Tibet, at the hands of the invaders.
더보 바지 가도 나무 미당 마셔려서도 나미나나 때마다 로기야 나서는 바지 나무 미당 다 바지 이거 침벌이 그 통도지 나라 원자 지부 차 용거 다디 간이 도 용거래 여기 아도 원시고 거래 그래 그렇지 버렸어 신앙 치긴 상장이기 말에 신앙이 간이지 침벌에 써야 되기 다지 여가 좀 샤야 돼요 이는 주의되게 된 것도 상당한 거 알았어 이 뭐만 다지 하고나 뭐만 돼 이제 그래서 가는 소우래 다 여자 가는 소우래 단지 미안 당연히 좋아지도 유야유나 매일 자기가 말어 지전에 진짜 선함이 생기도 진짜 선함 미스 순진이 선함도 호수 디디 로유사이 시점부터 다치라 손을 맞춰오는 이런 노대기만 로상선을 긴지 기대 많이 비기 야마jan 로유 영어고 바지 여기 생기
Although it's a common thing that we see in the history of several other traditions, spiritual traditions all over the world, yet one thing that really stands out with regard to Tibet is that within this very short span of time, say less than 60, 70 years, we have seen a dramatic decline in the Buddha Dharma and the cultures related to it. Not just that, in terms of the population of Buddhists also, we have seen an unprecedented decline of it within this very short span of time. And these all should call our attention and a serious observation and serious investigation, for these cannot have happened without any causes, and the causes could be from external and internal aspects. Thus, we really need to, if we are concerned about the welfare of Dharma in the future, this is a lesson we need to learn from the history of how this could have happened and what are the causes that might have led into this. And in my own personal observation, apart from the external and internal causes that might have factored into this, one thing that stands out very clearly within me is that the fact that people's conducts, people's behaviors, conducts, their way of conducting their life with regard to themselves, with regard to society, and thereby bringing about a decline in their accumulation of what we call merit, must have played a very strong role in that. With the decline of the body of the wealth of merit, we have just failed to sustain this very rich Dharma, a very rich and enlightening Dharma.
날려나 저 유양이 보기 담아지 나 날려는 주 보기 담아지 콩다부 야가는 제 되는 야나다 폴리시 볼라야 내 담아지 보기 단 나다 가 사이니도 스마트도 좀 차. 대강가 아니 야갈 밥이 위는 용셔에 담아지기 차요리 때 로즈진 대양 보기 나라 파지 밀림이 용거래 야나 소보 rules. That is Europe today, rules 해말리기. 정말이 시기 법대 전문을 찾아 여러 모두 왜 거기 되면 놓아. 남바 용기. 남링이 남바 용기 혼자서 되는 찾아요. 대가 좀 어디 저거 와래.
Right from the very beginning of the appearance of Buddha Dharma within Tibet, we have seen how right from the very inception, its very great masters originated mainly from Nalanda University, and then that's the trend that kept going on even until now. And this is the case not just of Tibet but also of China. And with regard to Tibet, one thing that's special is that as soon as Dharma took its root and got established there, we have seen how Tibet has played a great role in welcoming scholars from all over the world, so to say. At least there were several geographical constraints that kept people, even though might have been interested in coming, but whoever had access in coming to Tibet at that time, given that that times or level of transportation, etc., we were able to have scholars from Russia, Mongolia, China, in a way that served as an open place, open learning place for everyone interested in learning the Dharma. So when we look back into the history, we have to really take this into account in terms of how Tibet was able to serve serve everyone interested in the Dharma and in other fields of study with that gracious, generous hospitality. And so we should be as concerned about restoring that state of being so that this could once again open itself to the entire world to gain from, more particularly to the Buddhists all over the world. Particularly carrying on that tradition in Nalanda, keeping pace with the time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been stressing the need of adding the science curriculum within the Nalanda-based Nalanda-based spiritual institutions. Thus, we should take note of this need and make our effort in making this happen, and that too at an accelerated rate. And in this course of dialogue that we carry on with science, and within that different disciplines in it, it is very. We have to be aware that we will definitely come upon similarities, points of similarities and points of dissimilarities, and we have to take account of all of these, that too with a thorough study and thorough understanding and assessment of them, and thereby be able to contribute to each other in enriching the two disciplines so that both of them can come forward to be more successful and more effective in elevating the common goal, that of elevating the suffering, in achieving the common goal, that of elevating the suffering of the humanity. And in the course of carrying out this dialogue, we would see several gray areas that need to be filled in, that either of the two disciplines can contribute to, and then there may be gaps of explanations that need to be filled, and to see where the avenues are available in these two disciplines. Likewise, that's how we can carry forward this dialogue in enriching the two. Such prospect of enriching through such a dialogue is not unprecedented. We have seen that happen in the course of dialogue that took place between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, and this is how, the sciences of epistemology, sciences of logic, the sciences of reasoning, etc., in both the camps that of non-Buddhists and Buddhists have developed hand in hand through such a dialogue, through such a constructive dialogue. Likewise, we can hope to see such thing happening in this dialogue with science.
可以有的说，到到气用为那啥，人民菜一，得到大洋就什么，那这上个产力部最是找起来的是，这种我都拿不去，当然多米都被掐用过了，是哪个时代要嘛是的，这没哪个听不懂的，这个就是样的，我电信那家是我懂的多了，这个我都没这个玩意儿，我气那家。 那个中国的话，气就是气，还有这个重要的，你气用我不得，现在嘛就要嘛是，哪个身边那家在哪个那些我是看哪样了，现在家我人民菜一不多，这我看这那些要看完才用我们了，哪个那么适当，来给那家做，那是大概该怎么唱我的是，说的哪个这么多啊
Of course, while we bring this dialogue forward, we would definitely see certain casualties on either camps. That's very natural. And so long as these casualties remain on the periphery, not affecting the very core heart of any of the disciplines, that's so far good. So likewise, so in that respect, we have seen how the descriptions, at least in one version within the Buddhist scriptures regarding the physical world, and the distances between planets, sun, moons, etc., do not seem to really, stand up to the test of the empirical reality that we have seen in science. So be it, whereas we also see certain different versions of it in other scriptures. And even within the scriptures also we see incidents where Buddha places more importance in the inner cultivation rather than the external explanations that we are given forth. With regard to the inner core essence of the Buddha Dharma, such topics such as the Four Noble Truths, the law of causality, etc., are what counts. And these seem to be even affirmed further through such dialogues.
他多的人好像说，就是参里当南北有修的说，怕住我为啥第一，到路上那不就无嘞？南北有的下边这边大人，我说给马来西亚没嘞，参里边下边等了就没事，没就去，路上呢要不打是这样呢，你把都用过了吧？路上超马龙去，参里边我是参里下边去，得用不下去，啊，我说南北的这一点，参里下我就弄下面下，他马来去，大嘛。 如呢，就在这里呢，你看都用过了吧？确实没东西。如呢，不是该去不的，确实这个如呢，如呢不的，那么就给结果也得下个下的有的，那影响的有关有还是好往哪说
？Although this way of evaluating the dialogue so far would be looking at the dialogue process from an end result, or rather the end result point of view as to what it has led to up to this point. But when we do carry out the dialogue and the investigation, we have to make sure that it remains as objective as possible so that none of our emotional or partiality kinds of seeps in and damages the nature or the quality of the investigation. And this is applicable both to the scientists and to the Buddhists involved in this. And this is not just applicable only in the context of this dialogue, but rather in all of our conducts, be that worldly or spiritual. We have to always make sure that the approach that we put in should be undiluted, should be as objective as possible, so that whatever we pursue could be expected to result in a very profound, pure form.
这一切，但那个鸡，当然等你从妈妈等的那鸡，要养起过了个就没种上，到底那个怎么推要的？干嘛？要固定就是吧，固定就是吧，给确定了个也能要的，没感觉的，但哪个稍微要了，稍微冲突啊，确定了，要我这个我没做过，确定了，就我做没了。 我们说的，我们在哪了？送药对，过了也没太要嘛的， Pajulu Chunga Malay. Malay, so when he says, so when Allah, the Kari was show Malay, come to say. Kayoris, Bugina, won't tell Daniel, Gimu, Sayori, Shida Galikoyoris, Gimu, so Daniel, should Mason. Using with his show Malay, Shidagi, Junioris, the Momana, the Zamajan young pulling grace at the Rodanua. Doesn't know that I hate war.
This is one thing. And then another thing that I want to touch on by taking advantage of this opportunity is just what transpired in the course of our meeting that just preceded this one, where as a byproduct of our deliberation, it came out that many have already expressed concern in different forums, including the preceding Mongolian conference, of the need to ensure that the recognition of the reincarnation of the present Dalai Lama, eventually, when we have to face it, would go smoothly and without any interruption to our satisfaction, to our own full belief. And this is something that really took my attention, and I felt that I need to speak at least something about this on this forum. Looking back in history, we can see how in the month of Water Monkey, just before, that was almost, that was the year prior to the demise of the 13th Dalai Lama, when he warned, in a nationwide decree, he warned of such a happening, such an eventuality that might befall Tibet as a whole. And there he took the example of what was actually at that time happening in Mongolia in the hands of the communists, as to how that had very damaging effect on the spirituality of the people there, and also the practice, specific practice with regard to ordination, etc., more particularly in the case of the continuing reincarnation institution of the Keka Jejun Dampa Master of Mongolia. And there he had warned that this has happened in Mongolia, and unless and until we take precautions, enough precautions right from now, similar fate might befall Tibet. He had already warned at that time, and now it seems like unless and until we make our efforts, that prediction might come true.
어디 그거입니다. 나로 자유로워. 저도 공부 시원하시네. 딱 여도 지켜보다 반증이 또 보면 다 저는 그 쉬고래. 뒤 무슨 쉬고랑 속에 제제제제제 저 보면 이는 무슨 쉬고래. 봐봐 제는 제당 나 무슨 시에 단 뒤에 양심 무슨 제마제다 호마라는 게 뭐도 예미라는 게 말로 같아. 유초잖아 관련이요 말이. 주 가민의 여성 문제인데 시도 뭐 개말하다. 상하고 누구보지나 오고 시가 봐봐. 주사 가민이지 여성 문제인데 시도 뭐 개말하고. 다들 여성 문제 고다 먹고 그거 여다네. 얘네 간에 좋아야 돼. 가서 한마디 저기 다 두개 지어려 봐. 그들 문제는 뭐 송송 이라가 송은 조송.
Yes, in response to several media questions across the world over the past several years, we have heard frequently His Holiness responding, saying that whether or not the institution of the Dalai Lama lasts after his passing away would entirely rest on the Tibetan people as to whether or not they see any need for that, or whether that's going to serve any purpose for that in their eyes. So we have to take very serious note of those responses that His Holiness makes, in a way, by taking responsibility on ourselves in terms of ensuring that this constitution, if at all we see benefit in its continuation, we have to make effort right from now to ensure that that happens, and that too without any interruption, foreign interruption, more particularly politically motivated interruptions. Because Chinese are already understood to have made understood to have begun making advances in these respect towards this aim by passing laws and even preparing, even attempting and actually actually executing this on some lesser incarnations right from now. And given that the Chinese have no faith whatsoever in anything spiritual, having their very ideology of considering Dharma, or any, for that matter, any spirituality as an opium of the people, if at all they make any advance in recognizing the reincarnation, just as they did in the case of Panchen Lama, then we can be pretty much sure that they will all be politically motivated and politically influenced, and thus the end result cannot be at all reliable. So we have to take serious note of this, and we have to make it clear to us whether or not we want to see this institution continue or not. If so, how are we going to ensure that no foreign politically motivated interruption steps in? Thank you.
Deputy Rinpoche, we are all very grateful for your words of wisdom. And again, you see, I mean, isn't it historic that actually you are in presence of the successor or the throne holder of Jitsangkapa? And sometimes, in the Tibetan world, even particularly sometimes when we have this democracy and we talk about the elections, there's a phrase we have which says that that means if you are capable, even the throne of Gandhin is for you to have it. But just imagine, this is one throne you cannot campaign for. There's no shortcut to this throne. This is a throne that you cannot buy. I mean, I sometimes feel that when people give that example, you know, it just clearly really shows total lack of understanding of the importance of, you know, this office. I mean, this is, you know, from literally thousands of great scholars from these great three monastic institutions. You study, you devote your whole entire life, you hold numerous offices. Yes, it is indeed true. There's no way that anyone is going to derail. No one is going to bribe someone else and, you know, snatch you out. But I think it's really amazing that, you know, we have this great institution and we are in presence of such persons. So I think it's really, you know, we must really, again, be able to connect that historical, you know, sense of it. So I wanted to really express our profound gratitude to Gyaltsen Rinpoche for his words of wisdom. He also touched on almost all the important topics that you have discussed, including a number of topics that came up in your small groups, I think you call the business groups. But I will not, you know, go into that. Now it is my, again, honor to, again, there's no introduction necessary, to ask Kalun Tiva. I mean, it's wonderful because we have the Gadin Tiva, then we have the Kalun Tiva. Kalun Tiva, which literally means is, I think, the throne holder of the cabinet. Is the same sort of term. But I just wanted to say that I think no Tibetan in the last several decades has done so much to serve His Holiness as Sondro Rinpoche has done. Again, yes, I will say that. You see, many of us really serve His Holiness with all devotion. There's no doubt about that. But I think, again, you know, you have to have that, I think, samaya, you really have to have that layer, what we call karmic. Because I know that Rinpoche himself used to be quite cynical of, let's say, establishment, to be very candid. I was at one time, you know, the head of our parliament, the 7th parliament. And of course, Rinpoche's name always used to be there very high on the list, you know, when people vote, you know, for their parliamentarians. So as you know, important, you know, Gelugpa Rinpoche, Gelugpa was always to, you know, give a very, very high votes, you know, to Rinpoche. And then we have a different system. We have the 3 regions. So, and someone being from Kham area, Khambas will always give him a very high percentage of votes. But with all respect, Rinpoche, if I may say so, he used to be very dismissively refused to even consider, because I was part of that establishment. And we used to feel sometimes a little bit kind of annoyed the way that Rinpoche used to be, I mean, in a way, I think, he really then understood. Now, I also understand a little bit because he, I think, knew that the restrictions or the confines of bureaucracy will really make him, be able to contribute far less than he can. But ironically, 20 years back, His Holiness gave him no choice. And those days, His Holiness also, used to nominate sometimes, because we have the members of parliament, those who have been elected. But His Holiness also, even now we have the provision that he can nominate some people. And His Holiness nominated Samdhong Rinpoche. So I think very reluctantly, more than reluctantly, but he had no choice. That's how he ended up in being in Constitution, what we refer to as the seat of the Tibetan government. And then he's been there for the last 20 years. First 10 years as the head of parliament, then the last 10 years, almost now 10 years, as the head of the cabinet. But something that profoundly important, I think he has done is that, what was one of the most important gifts of His Holiness to us Tibetans is this system of democracy. Today we've been discussing a lot about, His Holiness, reincarnation. I sometimes say that one aspect, there's already, like Mandetuku, that means, he has already recognized someone while he's alive. That is not a person, not an individual, but a system. The system of democracy governance. But that was his vision. But visions, don't, translate in reality. We all know that. We all have our own little visions, big visions, but, visions remain visions unless you have someone who can help make that vision come true, and not only that, make that vision become solidified. So I think, with regard to the establishment or consolidation of democracy, Rinpoche's contribution is phenomenal. Therefore, again, as a Tibetan, I'm really grateful because he really served His Holiness to make one of His Holiness's most important gift to become reality. What is important is, will we Tibetans be wise enough, far-sighted enough to be able to continue to cherish and to be able to uphold that? And another thing that I was saying is that, especially after he has become Khalden Triva, and I had this great honor of spending, I think, hours and hours in presence of His Holiness together with Samdhong Rinpoche. And it's very moving and very wonderful to see this profound trust and comfort that he has, with his head of his cabinet. And I really feel that in the last many years, His Holiness' health in a way really improved. He has been doing all these wonderful things because he has someone who's taking care of all the day-to-day, things in Constitution, dealing with all the things that, he need not deal because, there is, Samdhong Rinpoche who's been, helping deal with that. And it also has, I think, contributed to His Holiness' long life. Because, we, make him long life offerings, we do all this, grand pujas. I mean, very sincerely. I mean, they're not just ritualistic. We do believe in that. But in the end, you see, most important is, tu matuba, to give His Holiness the mental or the mind comfort. And that, Prof Samdhong Rinpoche, being in his position as a Khalden Triva, that he provided. And for that also, again, as someone who closely watched, really feel, deep sense of, gratitude. My concern is, what will happen, next. Obviously, first of all, Samdhong Rinpoche has given us a lot of laws also because he believes, and, I respect the rule of law. And he has given us lots of rules. And that, one of those rules is that we even have a term limit that he cannot, run. And of course, he also doesn't want to run because, if he was willing, we can always rewrite those laws. And I know that the grassroots, Tibetans, were ready to rewrite the rule, no matter whatever some of the politicians, constitutions wanted or not. But it's not fair because he has, I think, given last 20 years in Dharamshala, But so therefore, I think again, it is really a great, honor for me to introduce to you a person who has, given so much to the Tibetan people, served His Holiness with, devotion. But I also want to give you good news. I mean, the fact is by, sometime in May, early May, he wants to step down as early as possible. He will not be Kalyan Tiwa. Therefore, if we are, people, those who are in this gathering, if we are smart enough, we can take now advantage of his great scholarship, his experience, his leadership, so that in a way, his personal contribution, I think, to this bigger kind of Tibet world or the Buddhist world, in a way becomes, I think, much more, possible. So with that, may I again ask Rinpoche to speak to us.
Vidutte kapna jalam gambir udhar mantaye naman samanta badriya samanta trishe. My knowledge of English is very inadequate, so it's quite difficult for me to communicate with you in this foreign language, so I ask your forgiveness and to bear with me. My salutations to His Eminences, senior Dharma teachers, and my greetings to young venerable Tugus and masters, and also my greetings to all the upasaks and upasikas, or should I say, Kulputriya and Kulputras. I feel immensely happy to see this extraordinary gathering of lineage holders, spiritual masters, and particularly rising young Tulkus, Rinpoches, and scholars who will continue the banner of Dharma on this planet Earth. As past speakers following, I also allowed to recount some of my memories of 50 years back. I cannot resist to remembering them while I am saying this, as I mentioned, extraordinary gathering. In 1959, when we first arrived in India, it was quite rare to find a monk in pauper robes. Most of the monks on the way change into lay dresses, and even those senior monks and abbots who come with robes were changed in the Baksa or Mesamar camp into civil dresses. I wondered at that time how the Dharma of Shakyamuni Buddha abruptly come to an end. Although the period of his teachings duration had completed just a little over half of its existence, according to the Theravada calendar, the 2,500 years of Buddha's parinirvana was commemorated in India in the year 1957, during which everyone was quite confident that this wonderful teaching would flourish on planet Earth for another 2,500 years. But alas, just after 2 years, it appeared to me that Dharma was going to disappear completely from the surface earth due to following reasons. Buddha Dhamma had already disappeared from the mainland India for the last 8 or 9 centuries. The Dharma that prevailed in other nations such as Myanmar, at that time we called Burma, Thailand, Lanka, and so forth, was only limited to Theravada, which was based on Pali Tripitaka. Mahayan tradition that flourished in Japan, Korea, China, and other places were based on one sutra or one tantra, or such as a limited choice of teaching, not the entirety. The entire Nalanda tradition, which His Holiness refers to, which includes the 3 yans, 4 philosophical schools, and 4 tantras. Not only that, it includes Buddhist logic, astronomy, and medical sciences. This whole nest of Buddha's teaching had flourished only in Tibet and its bordering Himalayan regions of India, Nepal, and Bhutan in the south of Tibet, and some portion of Russia, Mongolia, and China in the north and northeast of Tibet. But Russia and Mongolia were ruled by a communist regime since the dawn of 19th century for more than 6 decades, and during this time, not only just Buddhism, but entire religious traditions were completely destroyed. Communist rule in China began in 1949, and the Dharma in Tibet started being disturbed and destroyed from 1959 onwards. Therefore, it was quite natural to feel that the vast and the great tradition of Buddhism, its philosophy, its sciences, and other related knowledge was going to disappear, and it had no future whatsoever, which I felt. After reaching India in 1959, everybody started talking about the need to preserve and protect Tibetan tradition of Buddhism and its cultural, but there are no means and ways available at the site. Everyone felt despair. I still remember my first conversation with a lady called Mrs. Frida Bedi, a Kalimpong, sometime in the month of September, if I remember correctly. She was dreaming to teach English language to young lamas and tulkus in order to spread Buddhist tradition to the West. She met me and some of other tulkus, young tulkus, reside in the Kalimpong. And I felt that she was dreaming something which is absolutely unachievable. But she was quite determined, and she started Young Lama's home school at Dalhousie. First Delhi and then Dalhousie. Later on, in the mid-60s, when I was posted at Dalhousie as principal of Central School for Tibetans, the Young Lama's home school was doing very well, with around 30 young Rinpoches and Gishis. I used to visit to them and held lengthy conversation with Mrs. Bedi. By then, she had ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist nun, and she again and over again to teach me also English language. I resisted very firmly because I was not appreciative the other lamas also learning English, so how I can give up myself. Later on, Mrs. Bedi was successful in her mission, and there was many outstanding teachers among the alumni of that school. Everybody knows Chojam Trungpa Rinpoche was one of the most permanent among them, and I think many others I can count. I also remember Professor Robert Thurman, and he is not around here, and Professor Jeffrey Hawking, he is here. At that time, very young, energetic American gentleman, working very hard day and night in Dharamshala, despite of enormous inconveniences to learn Tibetan language, Tibetan tradition of Buddhism. And although both of them are friendly to me, but I was quite skeptical of their efforts. I wondered if it would be possible for these young American people from West to become learned scholars of a vast and daunting subject such as Tibetan Buddhism. Today, I realize how naive I was in those days, and my speculations were completely wrong. Big monasteries and centers of learning were gradually re-established, and those monks who were kept in Baksa were shifted to a newly rebuilt monasteries to continue with their studies. Various heads and leaders of the Buddhist tradition, as well as pre-Buddhist born, had made unceasing efforts to rebuild monasteries, learning centers for practitioners in many parts of India, Nepal, and Bhutan, where Tibetan refugees were settled. Apart from that, academic institutions for Tibetan studies were also established at several places with support of government and people of India. It all gave a new dimension to the traditional Buddhist studies. The traditional monastic learning system, which goes for lifelong, was successfully packaged in modern university framework for framework of graduation, post-graduation, doctoral and postdoctoral research programs. At the same time, Buddhism not only reached to the West, but it took deep roots and flourished by leaps and bounds in different parts of the world. It's a very happy ending. Today, we scarcely find a country or a place where centers of learning and practicing Tibetan traditional Buddhism did not exist. A number of scholars and practitioners in this tradition are now matured and well established. It is a very encouraging in real sense. I personally, once again, regained the faith in the prophecies that Buddha's teaching will last for another 2,500 years in this planet. Now it is quite evident to everyone that the Tibetan traditional Buddhism has a great future. But with this, we all have a tremendous challenge and responsibility to reach out to people and share the wisdom of Tibetan tradition of Buddhism with all sentient beings for their happiness and emancipation. I believe that this spread of the Tibetan traditional Buddhism and its flourishing in every part of the world within a few decades is due to immeasurable efforts of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and all other heads and lineage holders of various traditions, various schools. Therefore, I take this opportunity to urge all of you to join me to thank and express our immense gratitude to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and all other High Lamas of the various schools, lineages, for their miracle work of spreading and preserving the Tibetan traditional Buddhism and its culture. I think at the same time we should appreciate the People's Republic of China's authorities. At one side they destroyed Buddhism in small Tibet, but they facilitate us to spread it all over the globe. I'll also take this opportunity to remind you some crucial points and caution you against some enormous challenges. His Holiness often says that we, the Buddhist monks or religious workers, must be 21st century Buddhist practitioners. Therefore, we must open our minds and try to make ourselves a 21st century Buddhist practitioner and do something so that the pure, uncontaminated Dhamma could be accurately handed down and shared with the entire humanity, particularly with the younger generation. For this, I would like to submit some practical points for further course of action and your consideration. Number one, as His Holiness often mentions, until 1959, Tibet was a unique religious nation where everyone was taken for granted to be a sincere follower of one of the many schools of Tibetan traditional Buddhism or Bon. Thus, everyone was comfortable and felt secure in his or her own tradition. As a result, interaction and interdialogue among various Buddhist traditions and non-Buddhist traditions were insufficient and almost no existence among the common people, except for some great outstanding scholars. There was very little communication with each other. Due to this, there was lack of understanding and a bit of distance between themselves. Not knowing the real unity of the various traditions, some outsider observers portray great differences among our various traditions, both in philosophy, practice, and rituals, giving an impression to ordinary people that these traditions are unrelated to each other, like watertight compartments, and sometimes even opponent to each other. This misconception must be removed, and for this purpose, inter-traditional studies by all people must be promoted, and all scholars and practitioners must acquire basic knowledge of other traditions while practicing one's own tradition faithfully. Since 1959, under the enlightened leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and with the cooperation of all enlightened heads of the various schools, there is a growing sense of unity, understanding, feeling of closeness, and cooperation among the various traditions of Tibetan SL community. As a result, today we are enjoying the highest level of cooperation and understanding among the different traditions in our history. For this, many heads of schools, great masters, teachers have contributed immensely. We must recognize this phenomenon and its value. We must value it, and we must cherish it further. We must perpetuate this and make it a sustainable, deep impression in the minds of our younger generation. Secondly, in Tibet, performance of rites and rituals were given overwhelming importance, and sometimes it overshadows the essential studies and understanding of the deeper Dharma. Particularly those people who do not know Tibet tradition of Buddhism carry misinformation and wrong impression by these objects and performances. Even some Western observers have alleged Tibetan Buddhism as a Lamaism, something different from Buddhist tradition in India, Buddhist tradition of India. His Holiness recently, just an opening day, also referred to this. Of course, we cannot deny the fact that not just spiritual value, but cultural, aesthetic, and artistic value in these ritual and performances are equally important. But we must emphasize that understanding of Dharma in depth, as well as its symbolism, then the performances and rites and rituals. Thirdly, in Tibet, everyone was considered to be Buddhist by faith from the childhood. Therefore, the method of teaching in tradition and the order of paths was quite well established. But today, for the larger global humanity, we need some vision for introducing Dharma and the order of paths somewhat differently. His Holiness introduced some wonderful ways of introducing the Dharma to the beginners in somewhat different way. Apart from that, he differentiates between the Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist science, and Buddhist religion, so that the benefit of philosophy and sciences can be shared with people who are not Buddhist without involving the religion. We must promote this approach rigorously and sincerely, and I think it's a great value for the international community. And fourth thing which I would like to submit is the dialogue between modern science and Buddhist science and philosophy, initiated and promoted by His Holiness for the last several decades, has opened up an historic new avenue benefiting each other, which was referred by previous speakers as well. You all must be aware that I am personally not a fan of modern science. I know quite well the limitations, evilness, and unreliability of the modernity, particularly modern science. But in spite of that, I very much appreciate the engagement and dialogue between Dharma and modern science. Because without this, we may not be able to share the Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist science with common people. The modern science has created enormous misconceptions and blind faith in the minds of people. So without engaging the modern science, we will not be able to reach out to people and engage them. Therefore, this ongoing process of dialogue must be continued and also advanced. Lastly, another unique teaching by His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, is the principle of secular ethics. Among the humanity, there are many people who do not have any religious faith, but they also need an ethics for the benefit of themselves as well as for their community, society, and the world. Therefore, we must promote the secular ethics such as love, compassion, caring each other, friendship, so that basic human value will be protected and promoted. So without which perhaps the world may not remain livable, not only for humanity, even for all sentient creatures. Another most important one is harmony among the various religions. Each religion has come into existence for the sake of happiness and well-being of all the individuals. At least, religion or its institutions must not become a cause of division, conflict, and violence. Equal respect to all religions and sincere practice of one's own religion is the only way to make oneself as a religious person. This is my belief. Mahatma Gandhi's interpretation of secularism, Sarva Dharma Sambhava, equal behavior to all religion, we need to promote this principle among all the religions. And for that, the Buddhists themselves, among the Theravadins and Mahayanis, and among the various schools of Tibetan tradition Buddhism, must be keeping a very high standard of harmony among themselves so that it can be a model for the harmony among the other religious traditions. Finally, the Tibetan tradition Buddhism has reached everywhere and grown quite rapidly. Today, its presence is felt everywhere. At this juncture, I think we Tibetan tradition of Buddhist teachers, lineage holders, and practitioners have a unique responsibility in keeping this Dharma pure and unpolluted, to disseminate it in accordance with the Dharma Vinaya. I use here the word Dharma Vinaya, which was used by Buddha himself, so that whether we are a monk community or lay community, But while we teaching the Dharma, we must teach the Dharma in a pure tradition in accordance with the Dharma Vinaya. We must be alert and cautious to prevent fake masters and teachers, and also the religious sellers that shall have to be very cautiously watched out. Our gathering here and also the points you have discussed for the last 2 days carries immense importance. And I am really moved. And this gathering gives us a great opportunity to understand each other, and a path has been created to move forward with cooperation, togetherness, and unity. Therefore, in order to make proper use of our deliberations and exchange of ideas, there must be a kind of organization. I'm not talking of a big organization, but I'm talking of something, responsible group of people who could look after for the implementation of the recommendations which read out here, and also the ideas inspired in a conference held in Mongolia. Today, the Mongolia and Bhutan is only the 2 countries which claims to be a country of Tibetan traditional Buddhism. So we must look to them to lead us and to give a leadership for all the Tibetan traditional Buddhists all over the world, so that we could move forward jointly with a sense of togetherness and cooperation, not for any kind of political power or strength, but only for the sake of preserving and protecting the pure tradition of Dharma and Dharma Vinaya. And this kind of gathering is very important. I remember the first conference held in America, what is called the Gerson Institute. I happened to be there, and I mentioned that the Office of Tibet should not be the convener of such conference, and the religious organizations themselves do it with a real sense of NGO, non-governmental organization. And as mentioned by my colleague Jalil Rinpoche, I always been a bit skeptic of all kinds of establishments. As a punishment, I had to head establishment for a long time. Nevertheless, in future, and this time, I really appreciate the Emory University, who had come forward to sponsor and give all the facilities to hold this conference in this beautiful campus. And I really, I was telling to my colleagues that if it had been in India, no university would allow this kind of conference. They would simply say, oh, it is not academic. It's not academic. So here, we are not exactly non-academic, but we are not also exactly academic. In spite of that, the university has sponsored, and Geshe Losang Tenzin has worked hard, and his all colleagues has cooperated, and we all immensely grateful to them, and not only myself, on behalf of the Tibetan community in exile in diaspora, I thank all of you. And with these few words, I once again feeling greatly honored to be with you and have the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Samdhong Rinpoche. It's my hope that this very important remark that Rinpoche has made will not be lost. In fact, it's my hope that this really historic gathering, where I think we really took, in my view, great leap forward from the last conference that we had. The recommendations from the various committees will be, first of all, preserved, and if possible, be published. And then it is again, I think, as Professor Samdhong Rinpoche has indicated, my hope, and when I say my hope, I think I speak on everyone's behalf, since I'm supposed to make the kind of concluding remark, that the university, which has given tremendous leadership, continue to be affiliated, so that, because unless that is done, I think we may not be able to pass on this torch, so that there is someone that we all can get in touch and to further discuss what next steps we can take. But before going in that direction, it really was very refreshing to be with Samdhong Rinpoche on the same platform, and then not be discussing about. Normally, Samdhong Rinpoche will be trying to either promote His Holiness' middle way approach or trying to defend the middle way approach. But today, it was really refreshing, that he, I think, had the liberty. I think felt almost liberated. I think he all that he really can, discuss the subject that he really is, well versed with, and to deal with that broader. So I think this, in a way, made me feel happy, saying that, well, by sometime next year, we'll lose him as Kalun Thiba, but as I said, that we really will be benefited by his great wisdom. And in conclusion, I really don't have much to add. As I said earlier, I do hope that all the important thoughts, ideas that was shared will not be lost. And again, I do not want to go through the recommendations, because I think each and every recommendation is very important. But I personally wanted to emphasize on one area. I do that because all other areas, the dialogue with the scientists, I think, is at full swing. And I know not elements of it. But one area where every time I get opportunity to speak to Rinpoches or even to gathering of Sangha, I always emphasize the importance of us becoming more involved with social issues. To be very frank, I get sometimes a little bit kind of, wonder, you see, this great tradition to which we belong, it's always talking about, uplifting the suffering. Yet, I think, if I say candidly, Buddhists are not in the forefront in that field. We somehow feel that our job is to teach, of course, which is very important, to show the path, which definitely is important. But, I always say that there are, millions of people out there talking about the next life is luxury. They have so much suffering in this life. So it is in that field I really urge that all of us, followers of this great tradition, but particularly the Sangha. I always, because I'm ex-monk, so I have a lot of prejudice. I do have a lot of attachment. So I really always wanted to visualize, people, monks, nuns, and robes, there as health workers, as teachers, with your kind of sleeves up. So that I really wanted to emphasize. Even for, I think, let's say, speaking selfishly as a Buddhist, obviously want our tradition to not only survive, but to thrive. Even for that, we have to become relevant. We have to become relevant to those who are in need, those who are suffering. So this is one area where I know that it was discussed, but I really wanted to, again, take this opportunity to really urge, and I wanted to see that in the next, decade, that really that we are. I mean, this year, something really, really touched me is when there was this devastating earthquake in Chekudo. Forced people to get there are the monks. That was so wonderful. Of course, the Chinese kind of totally, put, blackout. There was not much, visually that you saw, but it was from Larangar. It was from this very important monastery, Seshu. I mean, hundreds of monks who were there immediately to, do the relief work. I mean, that's the kind of thing, I really, would like to see. And I wanted to put some important emphasis to that. And in conclusion, again, really huge thanks to the university, of course, to all the people who took part in that. And I agree with Rinpoche. I do feel that this should not be, Tibetan sort of a government project. I remember very clearly that Rinpoche was very, very firm at the last meeting, and he said it again today. But I think, Office of Tibet, in my view, has, two different, responsibilities. One, yes, it is the, legally, using the legal term, it is the agent, of the government exile. But, it is also the office of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So His Holiness, as we discussed, has, very related but two very distinctive, I think, role. So I think in that capacity, in absence of any other NGO, maybe Tibet, Office of Tibet can continue to, help facilitate it, not to kind of give directions, but, for example, to help coordinate. And with this tremendous experience, maybe my hope is that maybe in Europe we can, organize such a gathering, mostly with the religious institutions. Maybe, somewhere in Australia, so that then ultimately maybe we can, have a truly international gathering, because we can then bring all the thoughts that we have today here, thoughts that we may get in Europe, the thoughts that we may get in other parts of the world. So in that, I think there is an important role that officers of His Holiness can play, but in helping coordinate, helping kind of, get the Rolodex sort of, from, different organizations. But that is my hope. And then I must say that, I'm really very, very touched and pleased with, my colleague Tsong Pensola's enthusiasm, because quite often, for us, we do it because, we have to do it. But I saw this time he was really in it. I mean, last few days, even with me, he will come and, every time, even late at night, I'm getting a little tired, but, he had, these ideas. So that's what we need, because unless there's personal enthusiasm, simply, by doing it because it's my job, really doesn't happen. So I wanted to really compliment, my colleague. But the biggest credit and our things really should go to Geshe Lobsang Nyingila. Not only this conference, I mean, this conference itself is a such, but this important project that has, happened, this between the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism and this great university, all that. I mean, first of all, of course, there's the, the direction, the kindness of His Holiness. But as I said, that, His Holiness' vision is there, His kindness is there, but unless there are people on the ground who are able to kind of, plug that sort of, fruit. I mean, I know, working for His Holiness, we can't even pick up, like the 80%, 20% of the harvest that, grows, because of His Holiness' kindness. So, Geshe-la, really huge thanks from all of us. We really feel very proud, that our tradition, this great tradition, has, produced, someone like yourself. And so with that, I wanted to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. A great honor really to share the platform with such eminent people. So once again, my greetings to all friends, some of whom I have met after almost 25, 26 years. So that again was great advantage of being able to come here. So once again, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary Rinpoche, for wonderful chairing this session. Now, once again, I would like to invite Dr. Brinda Silva to give a word of thanks.
Thank you, Tsewangla. It was to be my great honor and pleasure to be able to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the 4 organizing institutions of the International Conference on Tibetan Buddhism for the speeches and remarks of this concluding session. However, Gyari Rinpoche has already done that much more eloquently than I could ever hope to do so. So I instead thank him for thanking our esteemed speakers today and also for his own remarks, which have been so inspirational and helpful. We are so grateful for the presence and leadership of His Eminence Kanden Chiri Rinpoche, His Eminence Kamba Lama, Kalon Tripa, Professor Samdhong Rinpoche, and Special Envoy Lodi Gyari Rinpoche, who came from most of them from quite significant distances to be with us here for this conference. We thank them and the many other senior teachers and leaders who also traveled from such distances to come here. I'm sure that you join me in feeling profound gratitude to be able to benefit from their tremendous experience, wisdom, and vision. It's been a privilege and delight to work with the fellow organizers of this conference, and I'd like to thank Kungo Losang Nyandakla, who departed this morning with His Holiness, and Tsewang Phuntsok here from the Office of Tibet, truly dedicated and gracious colleagues, as well as Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi, who provided the vision, so much of the vision for this conference, the courage to organize a conference of this scale that coincides with the visit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I can tell you, many of us other organizers were quite aghast when Geshe-la even suggested that. And also the hospitality of really making every effort to make this conference comfortable for all of you. But also Jim Wynn from the Office of Tibet, one of the 2 principal coordinators, and Brooke Dodson-Lavelle, also from the Emory Tibet Partnership. Thank you. From the Conservancy for Tibetan Arts and Culture, we thank Greg Kruglach and Amy Head for their invaluable assistance. And of course, this conference could never have run smoothly without the assistance of Irene Lee, Geshe Damdon Namgyal, Wendy Hogg, one of the other principal coordinators, and Anastasia Watkinson, Ray Toth, and Spencer Waddell, all from Drepung Losling Monastery, as well as the small army of over 50 volunteers from Drepung Losling. Thank you all so much for your work. I'd also like to thank Carol Beck and Laurel Studzel, who handled all of our audiovisual and sound needs for this conference so skillfully. And we thank Denise Thomas, Kelly Turnbull, and Leotis Watson and all the staff of the Emory Conference Center Hotel for hosting us so graciously and for making our sessions and our stay here so comfortable. I'd also like to thank Mr. Bill Schuler from the Conservancy of Tibetan Arts and Culture, our designer for this conference. Designed all the graphics, this beautiful backdrop, the program book, the bags, which I hope you will all enjoy. Did a wonderful job. We thank President James Wagner, Provost Earl Lewis, and Vice President Gary Hawk of Emory University, whose personal and institutional support have been essential to the Emory Tibet Partnership and all of its programs, including this conference. And also Ambassador Marion Creekmore, also of Emory University, without whose assistance we would not have been able to invite many of the, or perhaps even most of the guests that we invited from India due to visa issues and stricter visa policies in the US embassies. So many thanks to them. We're also so grateful to all of our distinguished chairs, speakers, panelists, and guests for coming here as leaders, offering your wisdom and your leadership here. As Dr. Sarah McClintock said last evening at our conference dinner, it's indeed humbling to be amidst such a great community of scholars and practitioners. We also thank the Klaus M. Holle Institute for Global Learning here at Emory, which sponsored this conference and last evening's dinner, and particularly Dr. Holly Semetko, its director, and Evan Goldberg from the Holle Institute staff. We thank all of you. I'd like to thank Snow Lion and Wisdom Publications, who helped us greatly in promoting this conference and getting the word out to all the Tibetan Buddhist centers around the world. They were very, very helpful in that, and we're very grateful to them. ICT as well was one of the organizations that helped us tremendously in promoting and advertising this conference. Did I miss anyone? And we thank all of you as participants of this conference. It would not have been a success without your passion and your dedication and your participation here. You've come from near and far to offer your experience, knowledge, and insights, to represent your traditions and your institutions from all around the world. Just by being here, you have helped this conference to fulfill its vision of contributing to the present and future state of Tibetan Buddhism. And we hope that the conversations you have begun here develop further to yield genuine and lasting fruit. Lastly, it goes without saying that this conference would not have been possible without the presence and inspiration of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We dedicate whatever merit and benefits that come from this to His Holiness's long life and to the spontaneous fulfillment of his wishes and to the flourishing of the Buddha Dharma for the benefit of all. I would like now to invite the monks.
This conference could not have been as successful as it is. That he has helped the involvement at every step of organizing this program, books, and everything. He has been working just really tirelessly day and night. So thank you.
I'd now like to invite the monks of Drepung Losling Monastery to offer the dedication prayer. This prayer will mark the formal conclusion of our conference. Thank you.
So this concludes this conference. Thank you very much for the Venerable Monks for concluding prayers. But I also wanted to just recognize one person, Geshe Shepelge from Drepung Losling Monastery here in Atlanta. He, along with a very dedicated and vast number of volunteers and staff here, worked so hard that actually last night, after the last event was over here at Emory, just simply collapsed. You know, that with the exhaustion and with the measure even when it was done. So I just want to request you to keep in your thoughts and prayers for his speedy recovery. And in conclusion, I want to thank our distinguished leaders here and all the wonderful, the Sangha members and everyone. And thank you. Have a safe trip and come back again. Thanks. Bye-bye.